Welcome everyone to the new episode of the reality show brought to you by the Ayn Rand Center UK. Today's topics, as usual, 3 topics where we flex our objectivist muscles, will be a chat about Kim Jong-un, whatever his name is, who's meeting Putin, and we'll see the reason why. So we're going to have a quick discussion on this particular issue.
And then as the second topic, we're going to be talking about Franken chickens, which is the fast growing of chickens for food and the implications and the debate over those.
And the third topic will be about France trying to ban more flights in Europe. As usual, trying to meddle with what we can do. Anyway, let's move on and introduce Thomas. Thomas Bisson is our resident health guru. And shall we, Tom, do you want to open up on this news about Kim Jong-un visit to Russia and what could be the motives and what's behind it, and
we can try and unpack it.
Yeah.
So my understanding so far is that Kim Jong-un had entered Russia on a luxury bulletproof train to talk to Vladimir Putin. One party is looking to buy food, the other party is looking to buy weapons. In a world where PR is a big thing, should Russia be worried about that PR? My thoughts on this are quite simple, really. Somehow Russia have this ability to do whatever they want, and nobody is ever surprised by what they do. And it's like, well, of course, like it's almost expected of them to deal with the scum of the earth in these situations and to play underhanded. It's, you look at the assassination attempts where, it's openly known that these hits were carried out, yet nothing is said or done about it. It's openly known that they just invade countries, and people just accept that that's just the way they are. That's just what they do.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's interesting about this is the coverage of it here in the West that seems to give both leaders a kind of evil mystique. And the bulletproof train is the first thing that's told to you as a fact of how Kim Jong-un is getting to meet Vladimir Putin. But one of the things that North Korean defectors have told the West is that Kim Jong-un's private plane is not properly working, it isn't reliable, and that's why he's having to travel by train. So the mystique of evil is sort of undercut by the reality of the impotence of evil at every turn. They don't sound quite so much like Bond villains when they can't get their plane to start, for example.
Yeah. So it strikes me interesting how in the famine-ridden communist dictatorship, clearly the guy doesn't go without food, doesn't it? Looking at it, if I'm it's quite interesting how we all assuming that actually North Korea would be actually able to provide functioning weaponry to Russia. Now we've seen lately Kim Jong-un and his cronies flexing their muscle, showing some new gear like a submarine capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Now, first of all, I seem to recall that submarine wasn't in the water. So is that because if you put it in the water, the papier-mâché actually melts? It's the same narrative to me as the great invincible Russian army, which when it gets into action, gets slapped in the face by Ukrainians. So are we to believe the narrative that the dictators are so all powerful and so great? I'll be a bit skeptical about this one.
It certainly seems like there's a fair bit of paranoia going on with all of the movements of these dictators. They're always concerned about who's going to oust them next because they can't trust, their own inner circle half the time. And I think the only mystique that does really apply in the case of Kim Jong-un, or the mystery, is what the people of North Korea are really going through at any one time, and how the starving masses are there's thought to be 10 million starving people in North Korea due to bad harvests, and that's out of a country of only 26 million. So it's certainly that they're the invisible people in all this, and it's the pontificating on the world stage, which is what you're seeing in all the newspapers on TV at the moment, for a great summit, but supposedly between two rather beleaguered leaders.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Tom, but I was a bit put off by the sycophantic way this was reported here in Europe, certainly by the BBC. Did you look at the articles and stuff, or did you just try to avoid?
I just tried to avoid it. I mean, it's a hard thing to listen to. It's hard to stomach when you're looking at two people, like two that represent so much evil and do horrendous things to their own people, the people that they are meant to protect, as it were, like, or at least their rights, to protect their rights. And it's what's interesting is when you hear everyone try and shame them. Like, so I've seen some reports of them trying to be shamed by, like, oh, what's this look like to us?
Yeah.
But you're judging these people by standards that they do not hold. They don't care what people think of them. They only care about taking more. And they'll do that in whatever way they can.
Yeah.
And in their own country, who knows what the propaganda machine's like?
Yeah.
So they get their own spin-off.
And that's exactly why I think it's reprehensible when the West, like the visit from Trump a few years ago, and when the West generally causes up to Xi Jinping or even Putin. I mean, the thing that really made me laugh today was a communique from France that denunciating how, oh yeah, Russia is probably isolated, that's why it's meeting with North Korea. Well, in the last between January and July, 52% of the liquefied natural gas that Russia sold actually was sold to the EU, and France is among the first 5 countries in terms of purchases. We have China, of course, Japan, Brussels, Belgium, Spain, and France. I mean, three countries in the EU that are supposed to condemn the behavior of Russia, actually providing them with support, economic support. And that's the thing, it's the worst thing you could do. Legitimizing the evil is the thing really we should try and avoid, actually, not even get.
Yeah, and the US's history in relation to this is not been great lately. I mean, Mark had mentioned Trump's visit, but even having to rely on Soyuz rockets up until Musk saved the day because your own program for going into space was on its knees. That only gives PR points to countries like Russia. And of course, with Russia being on the permanent UN Security Council together with China, they can breach any UN security rule, even if you treated that as being a valid thing. They're invalid simply because they can be utterly ignored, and as a permanent member, you can't be kicked off the UN Security Council. So it's really rather pathetic.
My ignorance on that is just I don't know much about how the UN works, but how Russia and North Korea are even recognized as not I wouldn't say countries. I don't know what the oh god, just a recognized country, I guess we could say, that is meant to uphold a certain standards of rights for their citizens. Yeah. How that hasn't been revoked multiple times over, I'll never know.
Yeah. And do you think that the proximity of North Korea to China, do you think actually North Korea is acting not necessarily as a proxy, but certainly with permission with China?
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, North Korea is a parasite of Russia, right? It's only been managed to keep afloat through what Russia can subsidize for them. And over this past year, Russia and China have definitely become closer, and it could simply be they become allies in one way, shape, or form or another. Yeah,
that would be great. So some of the reports actually were quite laughable. There were a few pictures of the great leader Kim Jong-un. In the middle of a paddy field, apparently was telling the farmers how to plant the harvest and all this kind of stuff. To me, it just looked like somebody was trying to escape North Korea, crossing the fields. That was quite hilarious. And then there was a piece of article saying something, as Richard said, the reason why he's on a train is because the plane doesn't work. But the article said something like, "Oh, because flights are much easier to track, and so it would be dangerous." Like, a train literally runs on tracks. I mean, how's the logic in that one? It's just they seem to justify the guy for being an incompetent dictator, and for a dictator being a disaster waiting to happen. But they're still trying to make him look better than he should be. And that's, I suppose, as part of the corruption of our culture, isn't it? Where people tend to go for a cultural equivalence. It's like, no, dictatorship has got nothing to do with a proper Western country where more or less individual rights are at least acknowledged, if not necessarily respected.
That's why it's so painful to see the two leaders lording it about on the world stage. And of course, it's no coincidence that they're likely to be meeting at the Vostokny Space Center. That is one of Putin's pet projects that has been launching rockets since 2016 and has been showing Russia theoretically at its best to the world. It's no surprise at all that they're doing that and trying to win PR points over it. And at the same time, of course, they're both blaming the US for the invasion of Ukraine, which is ludicrous beyond measure. But of course, that's what dictators used to, spinning any form of lies to their own people, are well aware of doing, and they play the media game on the world stage too.
But in the G20 summit, I've read something about the leader of Ukraine, calling out people in the West for not calling out Russia for the aggressors in the conflict.
Yeah.
And what does that tell you in terms of the leadership in the West right now? I can't actually think of a strong leader in the West right now that's willing to take a stand and consistently stand by their principles. And everything seems to change so much. It really does, it almost seems like virtue signaling. But back when the Ukraine war started, oh yeah, virtue signaling, it's all good, we'll back Ukraine, war of the aggressors. But now it almost feels like something's changing. The wind has changed, and now people are getting ready to cover their asses. Whether it's election season coming up, I don't know. But everyone's taking that safer bet, don't want to rock the boat.
But that's exactly the problem, that they're all enmeshed with them, and they haven't got the never mind doing something actively to combat them, but even condemning them seems to be beyond the ability of the G20. Okay, the G20 is made up of some weird countries, morally not necessarily reprehensible, but certainly not any high standard of morality, and they all seem right now to try and get on the right side of India, because India is the next big market after China. But there's still our leaders. I say leaders with taking it with a super pinch of salt. Our politicians seem unable to stick to a line, and to even force a veiled diplomatic language ridden condemnation of the whole thing, and that's really, really disappointing.
Yeah. And the key to this meeting seems to expose some of the weakness of both leaders. I mean, Kim Jong-un is going there in order to get food for his own people. I mean,
For himself.
Well, probably himself, no doubt.
His fridge is empty.
he needs a body by Bison, clearly.
That's right.
But yeah, it's an indictment of the state of his country, that's what he needs most of all. And of course, the fact that he supposedly has the technology to sell to Russia through the rockets that they've developed is based on the fact that they've diverted their money to such a program in the first place.
Yeah. Well, do you know what is interesting on? I know we're talking like taking a step back in terms of the leaders and the weakness of it, but I heard James Valiant talk recently when Nixon was in power. And his own party, when the Watergate scandal came out, his own party pulled him aside and said, "That's it, you're out." Like his own party. And he was like, "You don't get that these days." And I thought, like, since I heard it earlier today, I thought that's so true. Like, it's so true how quickly they'll hide. And it's all about protecting the party, protecting, like, continuing on this line of succession, where it just seems to get weaker and weaker every rendition.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether, I mean, to be fair, Nixon was found, it was cornered. It was so clear he just lied about stuff, and it did totally illegal stuff. So I'm not sure that one he could have.
But your point is certainly valid. Yeah, that people backed into a corner, and people who know that they're on the wrong side, those around them as much as themselves, should be knowing when it's.
I'm pretty sure if something like that happened today, people would just rally to hide the whole thing, unless somebody else in the background trying to stop the leader in order to take the jobs. But most people would probably try and hide the whole thing, and you probably wouldn't hear, unless of course, if you're on the left, you're not going to hear about it. The media and various other institutions seem to be more protective about a lefty misdemeanor than it is on the right.
Yeah, and there seems to be an idea that this is strength of two great dictators meeting, when really it's just smacks of desperation. It's like the two losers at the back of the class who've learned nothing, haven't moved on, and have to repeat the year again. It's that's the sort of impression you get from it all.
I mean, that is just staggering. The two buddies, one is scrambling around for weapons from the backwaters dictator, and the other one is looking for food. It's like, wow, you guys are really scary.
I think the only thing that would have made it better is, as Kim Jong-un is arriving by train, like begging for food, you got Putin arriving by horse with his chest hair, testicles just flexing and covered in baby oil. Come on.
Having just wrestled the bear with his bear.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. And the fact they even have to change the wheels on the train as it moves from North Korea into Russia, because it's a different gauge on the tracks. These two dictators aren't working together; they aren't synchronized. This is, every element of this shows that up.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, sorry, can you see any before we move on? Can you see any super chats or super stickers
or any comments we should at this point?
Super stickers, I love that.
We have a super chat from Megan. Thank you so much. She says, "Thanks for mentioning space exploration, Richard."
Oh.
Yeah, thank you very much, Megan.
Yeah, that was a beauty, because you see how private enterprise in the end is actually much superior to state intervention. Space exploration and space launches were mainly a monopoly of the state. Then here comes Elon Musk with his little cheap rocket, spot on.
Driving the cost of space travel down for everyone.
Literally blowing them out of the planet.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, Megan.
Okay.
Thank you for your super sticker.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. So the second story we're turning to today is about Franken chickens. Now, those are they're chickens that are grown in a super fast way, so that they go from birth to maturity in about 35 days, I think it is. They get to about 2.2 kilos in 35 days and then are ready for market. The criticism of them is that they are, certain animal rights so-called organizations claim that they are live unhealthy lives. But farmers have defended them as being a good way of getting cheap chicken to market, which is like the purpose of them.
I've just noted the guy down there just appeared. Our Lord and Emperor Razi, welcome.
Welcome to the conversation, Razi. We just moved to Franken chickens at this point.
Yeah, I heard two of Trump's best friends being criticized heavily, so I thought I would, I wasn't scheduled for today, but I couldn't let that happen. But yeah, you've moved on to Franken chickens. I have some stuff to say about that as well. So,
we're just about to move on. If you'd like to comment on the meeting between Putin and Kim Jong-un, feel free.
No, not really. I pretty much agree with everything that was said. So, yeah.
You two want to see him on a horseback, topless.
Well, other than that, but I do also agree with that. There was some comment in the chat suggesting that maybe if the West could make an accident happen during this summit, that would not be the worst thing. But
well, the summit itself is not an accident in itself.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean,
I don't know if that would be a good thing, to be fair. Having Putin assassinated.
I mean, it wouldn't be a bad thing.
And look, no one's going to lose sleep over it, but it's not a change in philosophy of the country. It's not a seeking of an actual justice. The guy's not getting, there's no actual trial. And I think, as lovely as a thought that is to have to this guy to be murdered, it's also a very dangerous line to think along in terms of this will just solve so many problems. It's okay just to do it this one time if this one person disappears.
Oh no, I mean, I support assassinating dictators as a general thing. I think it doesn't change the philosophy of the country. It does remove the person who made the decision to invade Ukraine, who made many other bad decisions, and it doesn't guarantee. So I've said this before on the show. When I was living in Israel and there were terrorist attacks on a daily basis, and Israel at some point decided to surround the compound of Yasser Arafat, with tanks, but not kill him. And I was arguing with people, why aren't we killing him? And the argument I would hear is somebody worse would come along. Well, if that is the case, then you kill the next person who comes along. I mean, if bad guys, who are basically, their whole mission in life is to cause harm to other people, are removed, that's always a good thing. Whatever comes along next, you then have to deal with it as it comes along.
I'm not sure I agree. In terms of just you're going to take that, you can still capture them and then put them through a system of justice and try them. And if that country happens to have the death penalty, fine, that's an easy way to do it. But it's important, I think, to have these crimes. It's an opportunity for us to judge the evils and call it out and say, this is an evil act. Here is the evidence for said evil acts. Otherwise, when it's just another assassination, it all happens cloak and dagger, and it's so quiet. There's no one taking a stand to say this is not right.
So I would love to have Putin, stand trial. I think that's less likely than actually being able to kill him. But in terms of the goal of it would be basically to stop what he's doing. And I think there's some chance of the war ending with Putin's life ending. I don't know how great a chance it is, but for that purpose, I would want to see it happen. And again, he doesn't deserve to live. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
I agree.
So I guess to the chicken story then. Any thoughts on this one, Tom?
I'm all in favor. I mean, if it's healthy for you to consume, then great, crank them out. Can we get it in less time? 35? Can we drop 35 down to 21 kind of days? It's at the end of the day, we've got people to feed. Chicken itself is good meat. It's healthy. It helps you, gives you all the nourishment you need. I say all the power to it. I'm in full support. And I think the guy's answer, when he's being questioned about it, he says what it is. The people are already voting in favor of this overwhelmingly by their buying choices. They keep buying it. There is a demand for it. So the fact that they're able to meet that demand is great, especially today when prices for that kind of food is going up, especially as I don't know if you saw, but more regulations were put on the food and farm industries to crack down on the amount of food there is to comply. So these farmers are really struggling to find a way to profit and keep their farms going by producing any kind of animal. So this is something that can help fill that and still keep them a livelihood. Great. It might end up being like in Interstellar, when everyone's growing corn, everyone's just raising chickens.
Yeah, there are two things that really annoy me about the story, really. First of all, they're calling it Franken chicken, implying that it's a monster, something that shouldn't happen in the first place. That's so anti-progress, anti-science. It just annoys me the hell out of me. And the second is that these guys are arguing that it's not good for the chicken. Well, the chicken is not like made of plastic. The growth time has been reduced from 81 days to 35. But shouldn't you actually praise the scientists or the people who actually produce the stuff? Or all the knowledge that goes behind the understanding how the physiology of the chicken is and how to change it in order to achieve something which makes humans' life better. And the stupid idea behind the fact that, but the welfare of the chicken suffer, the chicken gets heart attacks, can't flap his wing. It's like, I mean, anyone who knows a farmer, I come from a place where Parmesan cheese and Parma ham is made. And if you know a farmer, you know that they treat their animals much better than they treat their families, because they love what they do. They will never hurt an animal for the sake of it. These guys going around thinking that evil farmers will willingly harm an animal is just stupidly ignorant.
And the idea that you're breeding in such a way that it's caused mass illness in your own stock. Well, why would you want to do that as a farmer? You're not going to make any money if your stock is going to fall ill. So obviously that can't be entirely true. I mean, it feels like there's a confusion here between the way people certainly in Britain tend to look at animals is they confuse animals reared for farming with pets the whole time. And that utter confusion makes them look at animals in a Disney kind of way. When you're talking about rearing for food, it's a totally different kettle of fish.
Well, they understand the animal because they're working on a perceptual level, so that they're the same intellect as the animal itself.
What do you make of this, Razi?
So before I get to what I make of this, I want to thank Jonathan for his super chat and Megan for her super chat. Megan says, "Can Putin fall out of a window while on horseback?" If anybody in our audience can make that happen, you have our blessing. Not Thomas's, but mine. So on the chicken, so this is one of the reasons why I think in the long run, the right is more of a threat than the left politically, if we can use those terms, because the left has this massive identity crisis in that everybody needs to be a victim, and basically whoever is more of a victim, basically everybody who's less than a victim is suddenly not important. So if you're a woman, you're a victim of men, but if you're a black woman, then white women shouldn't be talking about feminism or whatever. Here we have this problem where the left used to pretend to care about the poor, but then there are chickens who are suffering, according to the left. So this takes precedence. I mean, the fact that we can grow chickens faster and bigger chickens. This was an issue a few years ago with the EU when they wanted to, after Brexit, they were talking about Britain signing a free trade deal with the US, importing the chlorine chickens. Back then it was chlorine chickens because they were washed with chlorine, to the UK, and those chickens were bigger and cheaper. The issue of people actually being fed good food, it goes away. I mean, the people complaining about this can afford the chickens that have miles to roam around and are fed I don't know, McDonald's or whatever it is, but some people can't, and they can, like almost everybody can afford the cheap chickens that you can get in the supermarket, and that's something we should celebrate and we should encourage. And as Thomas said, if we can get it down to 21 days, if we can, the easier, the cheaper it is to make, the better it is for humans. But humans don't matter when chickens are suffering.
The interesting thing here as well, I worked on a chicken farm when I lived in Canada for a little bit, and if only you knew, like, so when we're slaughtering the chickens, like all of the good and perfect looking chickens would go to like the supermarkets and all that kind of stuff. Now, if these people that are criticizing the 35-day chickens could only see some of the ones that are going to the fast food places and how demented and like they've definitely lived past their use many, many days before, like they're getting like the bottom of the barrel. Like, I'm sure the 35-day-year-old chickens are much healthier than some of the ones that they've already been used to eating anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this mentality that we should all eat free-range chickens from the left, as if we can all go to farmers markets just down the road and buy free-range chickens. I mean, this article had an interesting line right at the bottom of it when it was describing it. It described free-range chickens as having a catch because they're typically more expensive. Now, that's not a catch. That's integral to the nature of rearing chickens in that way. It's not typically more expensive. It's obviously more expensive. And the purpose and the intent of these chickens we're talking about here is for them to be raised cheaply and for the food to be cheap as a result. So they want to defy reality and claim that we can all have free-range chickens at a low cost. And that's just an utter fallacy. And they're trying to pull a con.
I have a request for all these animal rights and people anti-animal cruelty. Can you please stop halal and kosher food? Because if you're worried about animals suffering, well, religious people like to have the animals suffering before they're dead. The slaughtering of animal for kosher and halal is actually, it requires the animal to be alive and effectively bleed to death. I mean, is that nice? Is that sweet for the animal? But nobody seems to care about that one. I wonder why.
Do you know the interesting thing? And this is also to Razi's, these people are like anti-progress point. And a great question to ask a vegan or vegetarian or people who are around this animal rights malarkey is, when you can 3D print steak or 3D print chicken, right? Because that'd be a thing one day. Like, will you eat that meat? Like, because, you know, you're vegan because you care about the animal, but to know that no harm has come from from creating the steak and chicken and stuff, would you still eat it? And overwhelmingly, the answer's always been no. But when you ask them why, they cannot give an answer other than that it's just evil, and it's like it's still not right. We don't need to eat it, and it's like, based on what your argument previously was all about animal welfare, but now what's your argument? You take the animal out of it, now what? It's not. Then it becomes this weird romanticism of the past of, oh, when we were rugged cave people, living off the land, Mother Nature took care of us.
Yeah, it's the same principle as the carbon capture and fossil fuels argument, isn't it? If you could stop the CO2 rising, if you consider that a problem with carbon capture, then why can't we continue using fossil fuels? But yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Talking about CO2, carbon capture, and all this kind of stuff, shall we move on to the next one and have a good laugh at the fact that France is trying to outlaw cheap flights within Europe? What's your view about it? Let me guess, Rousey.
Yeah, we noticed this article came from Executive Traveller magazine. I can't imagine who subscribes to that. But do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, Google knows what I like, and they show me this kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's we were talking about how in the UK, I think in one of the first few episodes of the show, we were talking about this report by an organization that was trying to encourage people to take the train instead of flying where that is an option. And of course, where is it an option will be deemed by them. And this is the end goal. I mean, it's not to convince you to take the train instead of flying, because your options, and before you travel, you check your options to the extent that you think it's important for you to check, and then you make a decision based on whatever criteria you have. France doesn't want you to have that choice, and they've already banned short haul flights, right? Or flights where, again, the government deems that you can take a train instead of flying. Now they're going to ban cheap flights. It's very similar to the previous story and the kind of left-wing identity crisis, because this is going to hurt, of course, anybody who can't afford an expensive flight, but can afford a Ryanair, £20 round trip flight to somewhere. Yeah, I mean, I once flew round trip to Germany for £10 with Ryanair, and there were other flights that I've taken round trip that were less than £20. I think those days have passed for many reasons, unfortunately. But one of those reasons, Daniel says it's a €10 flight for him from Slovakia to London. So maybe those days haven't passed. But government definitely wants those days to pass, and if they want it, that will happen because they have the guns.
I might be a cynical bastard, but I see this as France lashing out at another company, in this case Ryanair. Ryanair, for the American audience, is the largest low-cost fare airline in Europe, and it's an Irish company. This particular Irish company, Ryanair, tends to use Boeing airplanes, and we know that France is one of the shareholders in Airbus, the European project, the big competitor to Boeing. So to me, this sounds again like France trying to intervene on a private company in the same way it's trying to, boycott Apple by forcing them to have a USB-C in it, in the new phone. So, I might be wrong. I doubt I am, because I'm always right. But, this seems to be one of those cases.
Yeah, I might take issue with that last comment, perhaps. But anyway, one of the things that I noticed was how they try both methods within Europe, because one of the things they're doing in Italy at the moment, the Italian government is doing, is trying to make sure that airfares don't go up to Sicily and Sardinia, and they're trying to force Ryanair, the same company, not to raise its prices too high. the absolute opposite of what we're talking about in this story. So they're constantly trying to meddle with the pricing of private businesses. In the case of Italy, they're trying to stop the prices being too expensive in the summer. But it's just the meddling is just deeply it's the fascism side of the argument, isn't it? It's where governments allow companies to exist, but they dictate how they should be run, as opposed to nationalizing them like probably North Korea does with its farmers.
Well, I kind of get the logic with the Sicily flights. I mean, I've flown from Catania in Sicily, and just that airport, just experiencing that airport is payment enough. So I get it in that sense. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, about the Boeing point, there's other low-cost airlines, and EasyJet is not a small airline. There are others that I can't think of right now. So yeah, I mean, it could be part of it, but I think this is very much an environmentalist agenda that France is only leading the way in, and we will see that here, because yeah, as we've discussed on this show a couple of times, there are those who are pushing for that in elsewhere, and the UK has its own special regulations. We have cheap flights, but we have also the highest taxes in the world for what do they call it? Basically, if you fly abroad, it's the taxes are higher than anywhere else. Yeah, so we governments will try to outdo each other in how they prevent people from having a choice when it comes to flights.
Yeah, and let's remind ourselves how much France cares about the CO2 emissions, because the European Parliament, the actual parliament of the EU, holds sessions in Brussels and Strasbourg. This is dictated in the treaty of the EU itself. So every 2 or 3 months, the whole people, the members of parliament, I don't know how many hundreds there are, plus their cronies and plus the bureaucrats and stuff like that, take a train and go from Brussels to Strasbourg to have a few meetings. Then they go back to Brussels. This happens, I think,
12 times a year.
Yeah.
So if the concern is CO2 emissions, you don't need to have 2 parliament locations. You could simply have one, if that was the motivation.
But the reason why one is in Brussels and the other one is in Strasbourg, i.e. France, is because France want to have an institution in its own territory, and in order to change a treaty in the EU, you need unanimity of the whole 27 countries. And France has always said that they will veto the decision if it ever happens. So if they wanted to save 28,000 tons of CO2 a year and 114 million euros every year, they could just make this little change. But clearly they don't care about the climate. It's just a political stunt.
Tom, what do you make of this?
I feel very strongly about this, but not for objective reasons. I have a very great dislike of France as a sweeping declaration. So I'm probably not the greatest person to be objective about my views on this, because it's, once again, as soon as I read it, I was like, of course France have done this. Of course, like, find a way to tax something even more, they'll find it. I mean, considering that's where laissez-faire came from, when they took to the streets, like, what can we do to help you business people? Just hand off, just leave us alone, just go away, just let us get on with it. And it's just a shame that the country that gave us that saying have not learned to live by it.
And they certainly play both sides of the same coin, because the Paris Air Show is one of the biggest air shows in the aviation world, which is had the recent one that was held, I think, in June. They sold $55 billion worth of Airbuses to India. So they're certainly not against flying when they're playing one particular side of the game.
But if you're saying it's probably one of the biggest in the world, wouldn't we say that's close to being a monument if it's been such a recognized thing? A bit like how the NHS is a monument, really. And then that just kind of shows how much status control there is, I guess. You judge you judge the country by the size of its monument, or the size of the monument will show you the state of the government. I know, Razi, you could probably correct me on this.
Yeah, I like the contrast between the air show where you actually, good or bad, produce lots of trade, and the NHS where you actually have consumption and pure destruction.
Yeah, I don't know enough about France to know if the comparison is valid, but I do know that we have to wrap up because in a few seconds we have a premiere on our channel, and if we don't, we will be competing with ourselves. We have a video, an introduction by Jim Brown for his upcoming course, which starts this Saturday on money creation and its consequences. That course is for platinum members and above. The Fountainhead Book Club will be right after. Thanks, guys. Thanks for allowing me to join in halfway through, and
Always welcome.
tomorrow.